The man expected fear, maybe curiosity. But what happened next, in the quiet of that first frozen night, would change everything he thought he knew about instinct, survival, and the invisible language animals share. The cold had teeth that night, not the kind that nipped at exposed skin, but the kind that sank deep into bone, the kind that turned breath into ice before it left your lungs. The street lamp on the corner of Maple and Fifth flickered weakly against the wind, casting long, trembling shadows across the snow. It was the kind of evening where most people hurried inside without looking up, without noticing anything beyond the few feet of pavement between their car and their front door. But he noticed. At first, it was just a dark smudge beneath the lamppost. A bundle of fabric, maybe. A discarded coat. Something the wind had carried in from somewhere else. He almost kept walking. His fingers were numb inside his gloves, his face stinging from the wind that had followed him all the way from the hardware store parking lot. But something, some small persistent tug in his chest, made him stop, made him look closer. The bundle moved, just barely. A twitch, a shiver that was too deliberate to be the wind. He crossed the street quickly, his boots crunching through the frozen crust of old snow. As he got closer, he could see it now, small, furred, motionless, except for that faint trembling. A kitten, he thought. Someone's pet, lost or abandoned. He crouched down, his knees protesting the cold, and reached out slowly. That's when he saw the markings. Not the soft, familiar stripes of a tabby, not the solid grey of a stray. These were spots, distinct, deliberate, wild, and the ears, tufted at the tips, too large for the skull. The paws, even curled tight against the tiny body, were oversized, built for something other than living rooms and litter boxes. His breath caught. A bobcat, a kitten, yes, but not the kind that belonged anywhere near a street lamp. Not the kind that should be lying half frozen on a sidewalk in a Michigan suburb. He looked around instinctively, as if the mother might be watching from the shadows, ready to defend her young. But there was nothing. No movement in the trees across the street. No eyes glowing back from the dark. Just this small dying thing, alone in the cold. He didn't think, didn't weigh the risks, or the complications, or the fact that he had no idea what to do with a wild animal. He just moved. He pulled off his coat, the heavy canvas one he'd worn all day, still warm from his body heat, and wrapped it carefully around the kitten. The fur was stiff with cold, the little body barely heavier than a paperback book. He tucked the bundle against his chest and ran. The wind followed him all the way home. Inside, the house was warm, almost too warm after the cold outside. He kicked the door shut behind him and moved quickly through the hallway, past the kitchen, into the small laundry room at the back, where the tile floor would be easiest to clean if this went badly. His hands were shaking, from the cold or the adrenaline, he wasn't sure, as he laid the kitten down on a thick bath towel and unwrapped the coat. The bobcat didn't move. Its eyes were closed, the lids faintly blue beneath the thin fur. Its breathing was shallow, barely visible, even when he leaned close. He pressed 2 fingers gently against its chest and felt the heart beat, faint, irregular, like a clock winding down. He'd worked with animals before, farm dogs as a kid, a few injured birds over the years, but this was different. This wasn't something you just warmed up and fed. This was wild. This was something that belonged to a world he didn't understand, but he couldn't just let it die. He grabbed the heating pad from the closet, set it on low, and placed it beneath half the towel so the kitten could move away if it got too warm. Then he filled a plastic bottle with hot water, wrapped it in a spare towel, and tucked it alongside the small body, slow thawing. That's what the old farmer who'd lived next door when he was a kid used to say. Too fast and you shock the system. Too slow and you lose them anyway. He sat on the floor beside the towel, watching the shallow rise and fall of the kitten's chest, waiting. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the faint ticking of the heating pad's thermostat. Just one night, he whispered, more to himself than to the kitten. That's all, one night, and then I'll call someone who knows what to do. He didn't know if he believed it. That's when he heard the soft padding of paws in the hallway. Milo appeared in the doorway, a grey tabby with white socks and a notch in his left ear from some long-forgotten scrap in his alley days. The cat paused, one paw lifted mid-step, his amber eyes fixed on the towel, his ears swiveled forward, his tail dropped low, not in aggression, but in caution. The man held his breath. Milo took a step closer, then another. His movements were slow, deliberate, each paw placed with care, as if he were approaching something sacred or dangerous. He stopped at the edge of the towel and lowered his head, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. The man expected hissing, maybe a low growl. At the very least, he expected Milo to bolt, to recognize the wrongness of this creature, this thing that smelled like snow and forest and something ancient. But Milo didn't run. Instead, he sat down, and then, so gently that the man almost didn't believe it was happening, Milo leaned forward and began to groom the bobcat's frozen ears. Long, careful strokes of his tongue, soft, rhythmic, deliberate, as if he'd done this 1,000 times before, as if this small wild thing was exactly where it was supposed to be. The man stared, his throat tight, his hands frozen in his lap. He didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't dare break whatever strange, inexplicable spell had just settled over the laundry room floor. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Inside, a house cat groomed a bobcat's ears with the tenderness of a mother, and somewhere in the space between the wild and the tame, something impossible had just begun. Morning came quietly. The man woke on the couch, where he'd fallen asleep sometime after 3, his neck stiff, his body still wearing yesterday's clothes. For a moment he just stared at the ceiling, disoriented. Then he remembered. He pushed himself up and moved quickly down the hallway to the laundry room, his heart already bracing for what he might find. An empty towel, a cold, still body, the end of something that had never really had a chance to begin. But when he stepped through the doorway, he stopped. Milo was curled tightly around the bobcat, his body forming a perfect crescent. The kitten was tucked against the cat's belly, its tiny head resting on Milo's front paw, and it was breathing. Stronger now, steady. Its paws twitched slightly, as if dreaming, and its ears, no longer stiff with cold, flicked at some sound only it could hear. The man knelt slowly, careful not to disturb them. Milo opened one eye, blinked slowly at him, then closed it again, as if to say, "I've got this." Over the next 3 days the man tried, twice, to separate them. The first time he gently lifted Milo and carried him to the bedroom, closing the door behind him. Milo yelled once, then began scratching at the wood with such urgency that the man gave in after 20 minutes. When he opened the door, Milo shot past him like a missile and returned to the laundry room, circling the bobcat, once before settling back into position. The second time, he moved the bobcat to a larger crate in the spare room, thinking space might help. Milo sat outside the crate and cried, long mournful sounds that echoed through the house until the man couldn't stand it anymore. He opened the crate door. Milo walked in, turned twice, and lay down beside the bobcat, as if nothing had happened. After that, the man stopped trying.
By the end of the first week, the bobcat was eating small bites of chicken at first, then more. Its legs grew steadier. It began to explore, cautiously, at first, then with increasing boldness. It climbed the arm of the couch. It pounced on Milo's tail. It chewed the corner of a throw pillow until the man gently redirected it to a piece of firewood. And through it all, Milo was there, teaching, guiding, grooming the bobcat's face. After meals, bringing toys to its bed, a crumpled foil ball, a stuffed mouse, a bottle cap that rattled when battered across the floor. When the bobcat stumbled, Milo was there to steady it with a gentle head bump. When it grew too rough during play, Milo simply walked away, and the bobcat learned. But the man also began to notice something else. The way the bobcat watched the window, the way its pupils dilated when a bird landed on the sill, the way it crouched low and still when the neighbor's dog barked in the distance. This wasn't a house cat, learning to be wild. This was a wild thing, learning to live indoors. And sooner or later, one of those truths would have to give. 3 weeks in, and the bobcat had doubled in size. Its paws were no longer delicate. They were broad, heavy, built for gripping and tearing. Its legs had lengthened, powerful, and spring-loaded. When it played with Milo now, the games were rougher, faster, sharper, full of sudden lunges and mid-air twists that made the man's breath catch. But Milo never flinched. Even when the bobcat pinned him, claws extended, teeth bared in mock aggression, Milo simply waited. Then, when the moment passed, he groomed the bobcat's face as if nothing had happened. As if trust was something that didn't require caution. The man wasn't sure whether to be amazed or terrified. He made the call on a Thursday morning. The woman from the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center listened patiently as he explained. The rescue, the cold, Milo's unlikely bond with the bobcat. When he finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You did the right thing saving him," she said finally. "But he's healthy now, strong. It's time to start the transition process. We can take him next week." The man looked across the room. Milo and the bobcat were curled together on the couch, the bobcat's head resting on Milo's back, both of them dozing in a patch of afternoon sunlight. What if, he stopped, started again, what if separating them does more harm than good? Another pause. "Wild animals aren't meant to bond with domestics," she said gently. "The longer you wait, the harder it gets." For both of them, he knew she was right. He just didn't know if he could do it. The enclosure went up over the weekend. A large, sturdy pen in the backyard, with climbing platforms, hiding spots, and a shelter for shade. The man told himself it was temporary, a halfway point, a way to ease the bobcat into independence before the final release. The bobcat explored it immediately, leaping from platform to platform, testing every surface, stalking a grasshopper through the tall weeds at the edge of the fence. It was confident, fearless, built for this. But every evening, as the sun dropped below the tree line, the bobcat would return to the glass door that led into the house. It would sit there, motionless, staring inside, waiting for Milo. And Milo, on the other side of the glass, would press his face against the pane and cry. The man sat on the back steps one night, watching them. Two creatures separated by a thin sheet of glass, each one unwilling to walk away. He thought about the cold night under the street lamp, the heating pad, the first slow breath that had told him the bobcat would survive. He'd saved its life. But now, letting it live the life it was meant for felt like breaking something that couldn't be repaired. The bobcat turned its head, looked directly at him, and made a sound, low, soft, questioning. And the man knew. The stronger it became, the harder this would be. Spring came with soft rain and new leaves. The bobcat was no longer a kitten. Its body was lean and powerful, its movements precise, every muscle coiled with purpose. When the wildlife staff arrived that morning, they moved carefully around it, speaking in low voices, their respect evident. The man walked the enclosure one last time. Milo followed at his heels, unusually quiet, as if he understood what was coming. The bobcat approached them both. It touched noses with Milo, once, twice, then pressed its forehead against the man's hand. A gesture so deliberate, so full of recognition, that the man had to look away. Then the gate opened, and the bobcat walked into the forest without looking back. The house felt wrong after that. Too quiet, too still. Milo wandered from room to room crying softly, those same mournful sounds he'd made when the man had tried to separate them weeks ago. He sat by the back door for hours, waiting, watching. The man tried to comfort him, tried to distract him with toys, with treats, with long strokes along his back. But Milo just stared at the glass, his tail low, his eyes unblinking. The man began to wonder if he'd made a terrible mistake. 3 weeks passed. Then one morning, while reviewing footage from the trail camera he'd set up near the tree line, the man froze the frame. There, just at the edge of the clearing, half hidden in shadow, stood the bobcat. Bigger now, healthier, its coat thick and glossy, its posture confident. It wasn't looking at the camera, It was looking at the house. The man scrolled back through the footage. The bobcat had been there before, multiple times, always at dusk, always watching, and then he heard it. In the audio playback, faint but unmistakable, two soft meows, not from the camera, from somewhere closer, from the porch. Milo had been calling back. That evening, the man opened the back door. Milo stepped out onto the porch, his body tense, his ears forward. The man stayed in the doorway, holding his breath. The bobcat emerged from the trees slowly, cautiously, stopping at the edge of the yard. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Milo walked down the steps. The bobcat took 3 steps forward. They met in the middle of the yard, touching noses in the fading light. The bobcat made a low sound, not quite a purr, not quite a growl, something in between, something that belonged only to them. Milo groomed the bobcat's ear once, twice. Then the bobcat turned and disappeared back into the forest. Milo stood there for a moment longer, watching. Then he walked back to the porch, sat beside the man's feet, and blinked slowly. The man knelt down and scratched behind Milo's notched ear. "He's okay," he whispered. "He's going to be okay." The bobcat had stayed only one night, but the bond they'd forged, wild and domestic, impossible and true, would last a lifetime.